talk about communication. I think that's so important. You said bad reviews are 90% due to bad communication. I guess the fine line for me is if we over communicate, though, we can run the risk of confusing the sale.
Yeah.
Sure.
How do you sort that out? Can you get into that a little bit and explain that?
Yeah, so when I say make sure that communication is there, like think about as you're going through your process and, for example, inventory. The communication is not only from the customer to you, but then from you to the crew to make sure that communication, so that way the crew shows up and they know exactly what the customer's expectations are. Like that's a level of communication that most people don't think about because they're like, okay, cool, I just got all this information from the customer, I wrote this quote, booked the job, I'm good. And then they just hope everything else works out throughout the process. So like, for example, when I would sell foundation repair, and I had like a really like special client, or they had like a special needs like child or something, whatever the case was, because everyone was different, and I sold that job, I would literally go to the project manager and I'd be like, hey, when this one comes up on the schedule, you guys need to focus on this, this, and this. This is their biggest priority. This is the only concern they have. And then when I translate that to the project manager, he knows, and when he sees it come up on the schedule, he's like, oh, this is that job. He's got his notes, and then he communicates it to the crew. And there's just like transparency throughout every part of the puzzle. I don't mean like over communicating to the client to the point where you cause confusion. But then like what Sean said, where a week before, if he knows it's that customer that might need packing, but they're saying they don't, and he calls them a week early, that's a great form of communication, because now he's making another touch point before the crew gets there. He potentially upsells the job, so now he's getting more money for the company, for the crew, for him, everybody. That's what I was talking about when it goes like as far as going into communication. Yeah.
Ultimately, you still, like with that, as you were processing, you were like, oh, wow, I basically have to get off the phone and quote this. So you ended up getting off the phone anyways, when we could have just, if we can slow down, which is why I say that that's so important. I had you write that down. If we can just slow down a little bit, we could think ahead to what's about, like we can think 5 steps ahead and know this is a big job. Am I gonna stay on the phone and hold this client up? And if it's quick to quote, yeah, keep them on the phone. Don't let them off the phone. We want to close them. But if it's a big job like that, it's like we already know, think 5 steps ahead. We're going to have to get an estimate, and you don't want the client to sit on hold because that's an inconvenience for them. So let's get off the phone, get them the numbers, get them back on the phone. And you don't want to speculate pricing either. If you're like, oh, this job's going to cost between 2 and 10, we never want to speculate. Let's get off the phone and then call them back with the right numbers. But for small jobs, like if it's $4,000 or $5,000, like that's a quick quote. You're gonna keep them on the phone for that. So don't jump to getting off the phone. That is not a solution, only for big jobs.
And one thing, we might play this game tomorrow if we have time, but we have a solar company that Maria and I train, and they invited us up to one of their like weekend outing things in Utah. And they did this like game with their sales team, and they would pin like 2 people up against each other, and all you could do is ask questions that related to, like, for them, solar, okay? And it's the way you lose is when you don't ask a question. Like you stumble, you trip on your words, or you like make a statement and not a question. It's a really interesting game for salespeople because it forces you to only respond with questions, which as a salesperson, you should only really be asking questions and getting the customer to talk the whole time. So it's a really unique game that if we have time tomorrow, might have you guys like split up in groups, and like I'll take one and Maria will take one, and we'll do that because it really gets you thinking like, what questions am I asking? Because you will run out, and that's how the other person loses, is because they like can't think of something, or they repeat a question that the other person already asked. So like, we might do that if we find some time tomorrow. So.